So far, I've talked about all muscle fibers as though they're the same, but we actually have different types of muscle fibers, different types of muscle cells that are specialized for different types of functions. And their specializations are related to whether they're more optimally specialized for aerobic respiration or whether they're better for anaerobic respiration. The first type of muscle fiber I want to talk about are the glycolytic muscle fibers. These are also called the fast twitch muscle fibers. Based on the name, you might be able to guess that these are fast. These are muscle fibers that can contract quickly. And they produce a very strong contraction, a lot of force very quickly. However, they can't maintain that for very long, and they tend to fatigue relatively quickly. These types of muscle fibers that are going to be fast and strong but not last very long are optimized for using anaerobic respiration. These have a lot of the enzymes that you need to carry out the phosphagen system, so they can get more ATP from the phosphagen system, as well as from anaerobic respiration. These types of muscle fibers are associated with fewer capillaries, they have less myoglobin, and they have fewer mitochondria because they're not built to be as good at aerobic respiration. These muscle fibers can provide a strong and fast contraction for a short time. Weightlifters tend to have a lot of these fast twitch muscle fibers because they're going to contract their muscles very strongly against the weight, but only for a very short time, and then they're done. In contrast, marathon runners would depend more on what are called the slow twitch muscle fibers, or the oxidative muscle fibers. Slow twitch or oxidative muscle fibers, like the name suggests, are going to contract more slowly, but they resist fatigue. So they'll contract slowly, but they can contract many, many times before they fatigue. This type of muscle fiber is optimized for using aerobic respiration. These muscle fibers have more mitochondria, more myoglobin, and they're associated with more capillaries than we saw with the slow twitch muscle fibers. These are specialized for providing endurance over a long duration of muscle contraction. There's also a category of muscle fibers that fit sort of in between. We have some muscle fibers that are fast twitch oxidative muscle fibers. These are going to contract more quickly, but depend more on aerobic respiration so that they can withstand fatigue a little bit longer. In addition to giving us a chance to talk about different types of muscle fibers, these two different types of exercise, weightlifting and marathon running, also give us the opportunity to talk about different ways that exercise can affect the muscles. These illustrate two different types of exercise. If we look first at weightlifting, this is an example of resistance exercise, where you're asking the muscles to contract against resistance, against some sort of weight. This type of exercise stimulates muscle growth. Typically, when a muscle grows, we don't add more muscle cells, although that is possible. Typically, a muscle grows because we're adding more myofibrils inside each muscle cell, more of these bundles of actin and myosin that make each muscle cell bigger, which then makes the whole muscle bigger. Any sort of contraction against a weight, any sort of force that's hard for the muscle to be able to generate enough of, is going to stimulate the growth of those actin and myosin myofibrils. Marathon running, on the other hand, is an example of an endurance exercise. Endurance exercise is when we ask muscles to contract many, many, many times, but not against a lot of weight. So we're not trying to build the strongest contraction, but we're trying to resist fatigue and build a lot of ability to contract many times. This sort of exercise has different effects on the muscle. Instead of stimulating the growth of the muscle doesn't necessarily get any bigger in size, but we increase its capacity for aerobic respiration. We see things like increased capillaries growing around the muscles to provide oxygen, and we see an increase in the number of mitochondria in the muscle fibers so that they can carry out more aerobic respiration. We also see an improvement in cardiovascular function and pulmonary function, so the heart and the lungs will function better in order to supply more oxygen to get to the muscles so that you have greater endurance. So take a second and consider which type of exercise is probably the best for your muscles. It's actually a trick question because the answer is both. We really need both types of exercise for healthy muscles. It doesn't do you any good to have all the endurance in the world. You could contract your muscles 100,000 times, but they can barely lift a piece of paper. On the other hand, it doesn't do all that much good to have huge, massive muscles that could lift a car over your head, but you get tired walking to your mailbox. You really need to have both types of exercise so that your muscle fibers maintain adequate endurance and adequate strength for carrying out your activities. Lack of exercise has a negative effect on both of those things. Your body knows if you're using it or not, and the more you use your muscles, the more you build muscle mass, the more you build muscle endurance. The less you use the muscles, the more your body starts breaking down your muscles and taking them apart, so it's not wasting energy maintaining large muscles. Without exercise, your muscles will decrease in size, in strength, and in endurance. You'll actually take apart some of the myofibrils. You'll disassemble the actin and myosin, so you have a weaker contraction, and the muscles get smaller. You'll have fewer mitochondria in your muscle cells, and you'll have fewer capillaries providing oxygen to the muscles. In extreme cases where a muscle isn't being used, we can see what's called disuse atrophy, where the muscle gets very small and weak. A common example of disuse atrophy occurs when you break a bone and have to have a cast for a length of time. If you have to have a cast on a part of your body, that will typically last in the range of 4 to 8 weeks. And 4 to 8 weeks is long enough to see a dramatic difference in the muscles. If you've ever had a body part put in a cast, and then when the cast came off, you could compare the body part that was in the cast to the one that wasn't, there's usually a huge difference. It's amazing how much strength and muscle mass can be lost in just a few weeks. But the nice thing is, it's also amazing to think about how quickly that body part was able to return to normal once you were able to use it again. It only took a couple of weeks to get it built back up to the same size and strength as the side of the body that wasn't in a cast. So our body has an amazing ability to break down things we're not using and build up the things we're using, which is what makes exercise important. Other situations where we might see extreme cases of disuse atrophy might be during a long illness, if you're bedridden for a length of time, or if there's some sort of nerve damage. If you've damaged a nerve and now the nerve can no longer cause the contraction of the muscle, you'll see disuse atrophy in that muscle because it won't be contracting.